Welcome back to the Morning Buzz. We have another episode here. Morning Buzz sponsored by Torquay Coffee with Russell's Fishing Tech. Today my guest is Dumper Dan, Dan Welsch from Dumper Dan Charters in Sheboygan, Wisconsin. Dan, how are you doing today?
Doing good this morning, Russell, and just want to thank you, gentlemen, for having me on board this morning.
Yeah, we're looking forward to it. This should be a fun one. Dan is a personal friend of mine. He was in my wedding, also a mentor of mine in fishing in general. So let's start off with sort of a background for yourself, Dan. Give everybody at home just a little background of not only your fishing, how you got started fishing, but also your charter background.
Yeah, absolutely, Russell. I started actually charter fishing in the late 70s. What I did is I used to fish on the pier when I was a young boy. Loved salmon fishing and trout fishing on the breakwalls here in Sheboygan. So back in the 70s, I kind of roamed the charter fishing docks at the age of 11 and 12 years old looking for a job on a charter boat. So I started, like I said, in the late 70s, worked for a couple different charter services, and then hooked up with your father on his charter service back late 70s, early 80s. And that's kind of where I started as a first mate. And that's kind of how a lot of the guys that work for me do the same thing. They start out as a first mate, and if they want to stick around and pursue this career, they go into a captain's license, run a boat, maybe even start their own business down the road like I did. So I come from back a few years ago, a few decades ago, but started as a first mate. I got my license, went to captain's class in 1985, and got my master's, actually, captain's license in 85, and that's when I started Dumper Dan's in 85. Right now, currently, this is my 36th year in business, 36 full-time years. Never did it part-time, always full-time. And here I am now. So I've been through a lot, up and down and all around in this industry with everything, with fishing, with the lake, with the bait fish. I mean, I'm sure we're going to talk about a bunch of that, and also with charters and customers. So been around a while. I've enjoyed it. That's why I stayed in it. I got a great group of guys right now that work for me. I still run a boat kind of part-time, but I run the business full-time, and I have a good crew that takes care of all the fishing end of it out on the Lake Michigan on my 6 charter boats. So long story short, started way back in the 70s, and now we're, at 2021 and still going very strong.
Well, yeah, I think we're going to touch on a bunch of those things, and I think you mentioned a bunch of really important things about what you do and the charter industry that maybe people don't know at home. But let's start with the fact that, you obviously started with one boat your first year back in 1985, like you said, when you got your license, and now you're up to 6 boats, correct?
Correct, yes.
And what's unique about your business, obviously I've been around this industry my whole life as well. You mentioned that my father is who you started with in the industry, so he's been in the industry for as long as you were, a little longer. So I grew up in the business, and what's unique about your business is you have 6 matching boats. Not only matching in the sense of size and style, but color. The whole program of Dumper Dan is always been a matching, uniform-looking program. And it's not that you have to have that, but I do think that it does give an appeal that, is unique to the industry. Would you obviously agree, because that's the route you went, right?
Absolutely, and that's kind of how I pursued this. And I started out with a 26-foot hardtop Stamus back in 85 to 90. And then I bought Dumper Dan number 1, which was roughly a 30-foot Baja hardtop, and I like the hardtop model boats. And then I thought, if I'm going to keep going and adding boats as we got busier and busier, I'm going to keep them the same style. Now, obviously, you came on board in the mid-'80s too, and first made it for me for many, many years on Dumper Dan 1 and on Dumper Dan 4. So you were a big part of us expanding over the years as well, and you saw that happen, and it was very exciting. But as I added boat 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6, I wanted to keep them all the same. It's just like you said, going up and down the river, out on the lake, it's a unique look. Everybody sees us, and where it's obvious. But more importantly, I saw over the years a lot of good charter services come and go by, I thought, making the mistake of having two different style boats, and not so much just style, but sizes. Because now a customer comes down, and I'll just use one example here. One guy had a really nice 30-foot Sportcraft flybridge, very nice boat, chartered, ran a couple hundred trips a year, very busy business, and he bought a bigger 36 or 38-foot flybridge boat. Well, guess what? Customers come down. The 30-footer is a nice fishing boat. It might even catch more fish than a bigger boat, but they want to go on the bigger boats. So they see this bigger boat, they see a 30-footer, a 38, and it just created kind of turmoil in his business. And I could see guys like that kind of going the other way. And I thought by keeping everything the same, they all come down, all the boats are the same, they're uniform, they're same size, same color, same make, same everything, equipment, everything. There's no favoritism. And that way we expand, we add more boats, we keep them the same size, and keep the fleet looking really slick.
Yeah, I think that's one of the really important things and one of the unique things about your business is the average customer, of course, because they're not around the boats all the time and things like that, probably couldn't tell you other than the number on the back, which boat is older, which boat is newer, the model, the size, because they obviously vary a little bit because, you have boats that are as old as a 1989 and you have some that are as new as a 1997. But truthfully, I like, being part of that for some years with yourself, but just also being around and down there, the average guy maybe that's even a weekend fisherman probably isn't going to be able to tell you which one's older or newer. One of the things I've always respected about you and respected about your business is you guys do a really good job of keeping the boats clean, keeping the boats up to date. And why don't you tell the guys sort of what kind of winter program you got with your employees? Because it's one of the things also that I think a lot of people miss out on. They think that the charter business is a May, June, July, August business, and that's definitely not the case for, at least for Dumper Dan charters, and my guess would be for most full-time guys.
Well, that's another thing. Good point, Russell, is when I built this business, when I started just myself and a first mate like you on board or other first mates I had, it was great for a couple people. We made a good living doing it. We caught fish, had good times with customers. But as I became larger in the industry with more boats and more employees, I wanted it to be more a year-round thing for employees, so they stick around. They work for me for many years, and I have that right now. We have very little turnover, and we have captains that have been here, including your dad, pushing 30 years. As long as I've been around, so that's a good thing. So what I did is back in the day, in the 85 to 90, I rented places. I tried to always get my boats inside and bring in heat and buff and wax, clean and fix stuff, but that worked fine when I had a couple of boats, but since then I built a very nice workshop, 60 by 125, fully heated concrete floor lit up with plenty of lighting shop. And that's our shop that we store the boats at in the winter months. And what we do is we buff, wax, clean, fix, repair, everything in the off season. So a lot of customers, when they're on the boat in the summer, go, what do you do in the winter? I said, well, we work on boats. 6 boats takes a long time, bottom sanding, painting, buffing, waxing. My whole building all the way around, we have rods and reels lined up all the way around, over 400 rods and reels that have to be repaired, fixed, cleaned up, oiled, and new line put on every single year. So it keeps us busy in the off season. And we'll also go into sport shows, which we do as well in the winter. But for us, it's a year-round thing. Yeah, we do get some downtime, which is greatly appreciated because the summer is 100-hour weeks, of work, and fishing. But, at the end of the day, it's kind of nice in the winter to have a few days off here and there to enjoy family time and to go do other things as well. But also the shop definitely keeps us busy in the winter, keeps everything clean and up to date so we can start the season just right.
Yeah, well, I think that's another part to touch on. So not only, and I've been on the boat too, and customers have said, well, what do you do in the winter to yourselves who are full time? One of the other things I think that's important is, the amount of time spent on the water. So let's talk about George for a minute. George is my dad. He's a full-time guy. I guess you'd probably qualify him as your number one guy just by the amount of time that he's been with you. So he gets first crack at all the trips. George is running about 230 to 240 half-day charters a year?
Yeah, he's right about there. Depending on, obviously, weather cancellations, he's between 220 and 240. The best year he's ever had with me as far as amount of trips was 265, and we still talk about that number. I mean, 265 was ginormous. I mean, for one guy to run in a season. And Jeremy Larson was back then, he's not here no longer, but he was here many, many years. He ran 240, and a lot of the guys right now are running anywhere from 200 to right where George is at, 220, 240. So all six boats are over 200 trips a year. And we've been averaging that for over a decade now. So, I mean, we've got a real solid, customer base, but also these guys do have a ton of hours on the lake and a lot of work out there on Lake Michigan.
One of the other things I think that I wanted to, I put out some questionnaires on the internet, kind of asking some questions, trying to figure out what maybe some of our guests would want to hear. And one of the questions that popped up was, what is the difference in what you're seeing in the fishing from maybe the mid 80s, early 90s when you got started and really got going in comparison to, now today? And like you mentioned, I mean, in fairness, you don't fish as much now as you once did. And that's because you're busy running the business, and we'll talk about a little bit of the details of that in a little bit here. But, you obviously are still out there, enough that you're seeing the changes, and even the changes to when you still were full-time on the lake. What's been some of the big differences between the mid-'80s and today that you've seen in the fishery and the fishing itself?
Right. Yeah. I'm down there obviously every day, meeting and greeting all my people, getting them in their condos, and they come in the store, they get on the boats, and I run the whole show on shore. So I'm not on the water like I used to be, but I got to, run everything on the shore, and it runs like a well oiled machine. And that's because of me being on the shore. And I get the feedback from all my guys, and I do get out there too and fish, either fun fish or take some requests out of people that have been here 36 years straight that request me. And I see the changes. And the biggest thing, Russell, I got to say, and I'm sure you're well aware of that, is water clarity. Water clarity is the biggest thing right now. And that's not just now, that's been for a while, because of the zebra mussels. The water's a lot more clear than it ever has been. So what does that mean for us? That means we got to change our technique. I mean, downrigger fishing, I mean, when you and I ran boat number one for 8, 9 years, caught a ton of fish on downriggers. It's still my favorite setup. My favorite bite is a downrigger bite. But other stuff has kind of become better than that, by spreading out, getting equipment way out there, way back there with the water, with the clear water of Lake Michigan nowadays. So water clarity is the biggest thing. You got to adapt to that. You got to get your tackle out and beyond the boat, just because of the clear water. The other thing is, and I talk to a lot of charter captains about this because I try and monitor down south when the coals might get here, when they do get here in the spring and May, June, and also lake trout fishing and a lot of other king fishing when fish come across from Michigan. I talk to guys over there. And currents, I think nowadays is number two. That South Point, south of Sheboygan, there's a lot of times there's a really massive current that way that I think pushed coals across the lake, and we don't get them if we don't have a prevailing spring south wind that gets the current going northbound to get the fish to us quicker and more of them. So I've seen that too by talking to Port Washington charter boat captains and Milwaukee guys too. So current, water clarity, two biggest things that you got to kind of adapt to and kind of monitor and make adjustments to catch more fish.
Yeah. So let's talk tackle a little bit, Dumper. You've obviously, you've been around the game for what's going close on to 40 years now. That's another thing that's obviously changed tremendously. And it's funny because, one of the things in the industry that I'm known for is sort of innovating tackle, customizing tackle, yada, yada, yada. But I got to give you 100% props on this. You were kind of the guy that got me started on that, about 30 years ago now, 25 to 30 years ago. And what I mean by that, and you remember this, back to the old days when I started working for you, you had a little tackle box in the cabin full of tape that we used to buy at a local tackle store, and we were taping up a brand of spoon called Yuck Spoons at that time. And I wasn't, at that young age, I wasn't necessarily taping them up as much as you were. But then, as I got a little older and got into my teens, 15, 16, I was working for you. We started taping up Pro Kings, and we were taping up Yuck Spoons. And, we were naming them. And at that time, I think I can say that you obviously felt like customizing those baits was helping you catch more fish. and now that's gotten into the position now where you walk into my store and you see all the different flasher colors and fly colors and, you know, the specialty stuff we're doing here at my store. How important was that then, and how important do you feel it is now that your 6 boats are lined up with the right tackle from the right places, you know, and it's specialty stuff that maybe everybody doesn't have?
Well, it's very important. Like you said, back in the day, I mean, to make a lure, no matter what it was, nowadays it's a flasher like you're doing, but and they're catching more fish than spoons, you know, currently. But back in the day, the yuck spoon, I used to buy the blanks, and we used to tape them up and make different colors, and it gave you just uh, another piece of, you know, tackle to put out there in the lake to catch fish that's up and beyond what you can buy off the shelf, you know. And you're doing the same thing with flashers. You can make your own flashers. You make all the custom stuff. Back then I made a lot of custom spoons, and you know, if I saw a color was, you know, like a blue was working, or a green, or a white glow in the dark, silver back bait, white back bait, you know, I would make something similar and make 3 or 4 of them close to that, so we could run them in different areas on dipsies and slide divers, mag divers, downriggers, whatever, copper. Back then we didn't have copper, we had lead core, but it was important, you know. I mean, just to add more tackle to your arsenal, and get more tackle out there and try different things. And we used to, I mean, my wife used to laugh at me. I used to take a plate, turn the oven to warm, and put about a dozen yuck spoons on there at 350 for a minute in the oven, and that would bake that tape on there, and kings could chew on that all day long and not get that tape off. So, I mean, just to bake the tape on was a little secret as well. But I obviously look where you're at right now with your tackle company and how you expanded over the years with making custom stuff. And that's so important with what you have going on right now and what we did back in the day, because it just puts more fish in the cooler. Absolutely. And it's just good to have different avenues and options of tackle when the going gets tough.
All right. Well, before we get back to a couple more details about charter fishing, because I got a couple of charter, you know, specific questions I think I want to ask that guests are going to want to hear. We're going to do a little story time for a minute. We're going to tell a couple stories that I think will be fun for some of the people at home to listen to. People that know me personally or follow me know how competitive I am. And I get a lot of that from my dad. He's ultra competitive. I get a lot of that from growing up and working for you. You're ultra competitive. Back in the early 90s, you had 2 boats, Dumper Dan 1 and Dumper Dan. Well, actually, you had Dumper Dan 1, and then you had a boat that you leased for a while first. And then you also had Dumper Dan 2. And at that time, it was you and me, and it was my dad and my cousin Dave. And one of my favorite stories of all time that I want you to tell was the time you and I went up to Algoma Hardware, up in Algoma, and we got a jump start on those guys. They were following behind us just a little ways. And when we got up there, we found those custom squid Pro Kings, and I'll let you take the story from here.
Gee, thanks for putting me on the spotlight. That was a day, though. That's unbelievable. First of all, that crew that Russell just mentioned, I mean, we had a ton of fun together. And talk about competitive. It was a 2-boat super tournament every day. And for a customer, it was huge because we were given 120% every day to catch as many fish as we could, and we still do. Even with the 6 boats I have now, guys want to catch them. They don't want to be the guy coming in with the least amount. And Russell, Dave, I, and George were the same way back in the day with 2 Dumper Dan boats. But going up to, I was friends with Jerry up at Algoma Hardware back in the days in the 80s, mid to late 80s, early 90s, give or take. And he turned me on to some nice tackle, and that's where I bought some of my spoons. And that's also where I started trolling rotating flashers. But with the squid spoon you're talking about, yeah, we went up there. He had some in stock, and Russell and I bought them out and grabbed all the lures and put them in the boat and ran them and caught a lot of fish on them. And obviously in boat number 2 got some as well. But I mean, there's another example of going somewhere and buying something different at a different port and bringing it back here and catching a ton of fish on it. So we had fun with it. We were very competitive between the 2 boats. We also worked together when need be.
Yeah, I mean, I think the important part there is the competitiveness. I think that's what a lot of people miss, and maybe not every business is like that. You know, I'm not going to speak for anybody else, but just being around the industry, my point of that story was, you know, not everybody's got that drive. And what you just mentioned is true as far as Dumper Dan charters and as far as, working around there and being around there my whole life, it's a super tournament every day because you have 2 boats and 3 boats and 4 boats and 5 and now 6. Nobody wants to be on the bottom of the pole. Nobody. It's not fun. I don't care how competitive you are or how non-competitive you are. Coming in every day with the least amount of fish and 6 boats is not fun. So what ends up happening is you create this imaginary competition every single time that the boats leave the slip, which is twice a day, sometimes 3 times a day, and that only drives the captain and the mate to want to catch them more. And I feel like that's an advantage for customers, like you said, because obviously, these guys are trying every single day their absolute butt off and as hard as they can to put as many fish in the boat. And that's one of my few favorite stories. I got a lot of them, but one of my few favorite stories of all time is when, you told Jerry, I'll take every single Glow Custom Pro King on the rack. And he's like, all of them? And you're like, yeah, I'll take them all. Because at the end of the day, we ended up sharing with George and Dave, but we wanted to test them out before they got an opportunity to use them. So in return, George got us back, if you remember right, when the Magnum spoons came out. And that's also one of my favorite stories. My dad and Dave tested one of the first kind of Pro King Magnum spoons that came out on the market, and the story behind that is they didn't tell us about it. They were catching fish on it until my dad dropped his phone in the lake while trying to grab a rod with a fish on that Magnum Pro King, and then felt like he had to tell you because it was a work phone. So finally felt like he had to tell you that they were pounding on those Magnum spoons before we knew about it because he needed you to get him a new phone. So that had gone on for weeks before we found out about that one. So they got us back. There's no doubt about it. One of the other things I thought would be fun to do is, why don't you tell, and of course we're not going to talk, names or anything like that, but why don't you tell one of your favorite stories of all time, maybe that, of you and a charter, maybe that's fun or whatever, and then why don't you tell one of those horror stories? And I think, people at home are going to want to hear those, you've seen it all, obviously, doing it for 30 years. You've had all kinds of groups from all kinds of different places. That's part of the game. Like owning a restaurant or a retail store or anything else, you're going to deal with a lot of different people, and not everybody's the same. So tell one of your favorite stories, maybe of all time, whether it was the fishing, the people, a mix of both, big group, small group, whatever. And then why don't you tell maybe one of the horror stories of the business, that maybe people don't understand some of the things that a charter captain or a charter business owner might deal with.
Well, as far as a fun story, I got a million of them, so I'll try and figure out the best one. But over all the years, that's why I still fish today, even with some of my groups, because I have groups that have been here, like Lacrosse, Abby Nichols group, 36 years straight, Vicky Reed group, a lot of fun with a lot of them guys and a lot of customers of mine that request me, fished with you and me for many years, and now fish either with me or with George or my crew. But we've had a ton of fun, some great stories, some good times. I guess the biggest story we still talk about in the shop a little bit is back when you mentioned I had that lease boat, and I tried it out before I bought Dumper Dan 2 to see. It's a big jump to go from one boat to 2. That was the biggest hurdle I ever made. From there on out, it was easier. But anyways, long story short, I was running Dumper Dan number 1, and the Kings were biting on the North Point Reef. And I had this group out, the Abby Nichols group of 5 guys, and they come every year in July. And I had George on the lease boat, which we ran a lot, the Cherokee, 30-foot Cherokee. But Jim that day had the boat and had some friends that he wanted to take out. So I had to farm it out to another charter boat, and I put George on there to run it with the owner of that charter boat. And they fished a gap, we fished a reef, and we were right next to each other. You kind of see each other from North Point, But that day was one of the days that we would just had the hot hand, and we had 5 on at one time. We had a big brown and 4 kings on at one time. We got them all. We had to net 1 fish off the bow, and we got them all in at one time on a 5-banger, and they mounted all 5 fish. Each guy, Keith, all them guys, all mounted their fish. They were all big kings, and they were a big brown over 20. And when we came back to the dock, we thought the other boat did about the same in the gap. Well, we limited out. We had 25 fish, and it was a heavy rack of fish with 5 guys, and they had 4. And we felt happy but sad because the other half of the group was their half. They were the younger kids. I had the older adults. But even now today, since then, the kids have laid the wood to us a bunch and caught more fish than the old guys have. Last year, Alex and I on boat number 5 had them out and had a similar situation with that many on at one time. I think it was during the Salmon Cup even. It was in June. But that was one of my greatest trips because we came in, we had a great catch, we had 5 fish mounted, and since then it's been competitive with them guys. So it's been kind of fun to see them guys compete back and forth since that day, and they've been here ever since. So that's been one of the good ones. The day we caught the biggest king out of the port of Sheboygan was a good day, but a bad day. We were out fishing 300 feet of water. Beachy was my first mate, Joey, and we were out 300 fishing rainbows, and everybody's catching rainbows. And it's a north wind at about 10 to 15 chops, about 3 to 5 foot. It was rough. And that day we caught 2 rainbows. Everybody else had coolers full of rainbows. We're struggling. 9 o'clock in the morning, the boom rigger goes off 17 feet down. We catch a 40-pound king. We come back to the dock. It's 39-pound, 10-ounce on the digital scale at Jerry's Wharf here in Sheboygan. DNR comes down, press comes down. That day, again, it started very bad. We came in with 3 fish, but we had the biggest king out of the port at that time, and I think still is. So that was another trip that kind of started out bad on a bad note. When we came in, the customers were happy, even though we had 3. We had a big monster in the pail. So that was kind of nice, and that went on the wall and got mounted. So over the years, I've seen a lot of stuff happen from storms. The scariest stuff, obviously, is lightning and high waves. Been through a ton of that. Had issues with that over the years, and I'm sure you have too, Russell, with your tournaments and charter fishing. But you kind of cherish the days with some of your customers that you had a good time with, that you continuously fish with. It's a lot of fun, and it turns into more. It's almost like family more than it is, work, because you have a lot of relationship with these people. They come back and you joke around about the good old days, just like we still do. So, yeah, it's been fun. It's 36th year. I'm excited. 2021 is coming up quick, and reservations are coming in hot right now, and really looking forward to moving on and hopefully having a great season.
Well, I'm going to tell quickly one of my favorite stories of running with you, in the sense of the not so fun part. I've got a lot of fun favorite stories, but one of my favorite stories in the not so fun part, and you'll remember this one, I'm sure. I was older at this time. I was working part-time for you, just on weekends and things like that. It was on boat number 4, I believe, when you had just got it, maybe the first year, and you had a big corporate group out. I think you had 5 boats at that time. And you and I were out together, and you were getting everybody lined up. And when I came down there, the guys were already down there, an hour before. And you can tell right away when everybody's been drinking. And I'm sure you'll probably start to remember this as I tell the story. But you got everybody out, as you always did. We always kind of went out last. You'd make sure everybody was on the boats, and all the boats were heading out, and you and I'd go out last. And we got, the group, and that was set to go on our boat, and one of the guys was just inebriated drunk at 2 o'clock in the afternoon. It was an afternoon charter. I think it was a 2 to 7, if I remember right. Might have been a 3 to 8, but he was just hammered. And he had one of those giant plastic cups you'd get at like a Country USA concert or whatever, just full of alcohol. And before we even left, you talked to the guy that was running the group, and you told him, like, listen, this guy's out of control. He was out of control already on the dock. He's got to stay back. And the guy talked you into saying, no, he's okay. He's going to go. I'll tell him he can't drink anymore, yada, yada, yada. And one of the few times I really saw you put your foot down, you were like, okay, but he's absolutely not drinking, yada, 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 and he can't get up. We just, for safety purposes, right? He can't get up. So this guy was a big guy, if you remember, real big guy, much bigger than you and I. And I remember we got out in the lake, and within the first 5 minutes, he tried to get up. And at the end, I remember you tying a rope to the side of the boat, to the rail on Dumper Dan 4, and tying it around his waist, because you were so afraid he was going to fall in. And he just obviously, you tried to keep him sitting down, but he just got excited when guys got fish on and got up. And, finally later in the day, he did sober up enough. I think he even caught a fish, and he did behave to some level, in the sense of didn't drink anymore or whatever. But you had to tie a rope to the side rail of the boat and basically told the guy, listen, you got to sit in this chair here until you're, okay enough to be able to get up and move around. And those are some of the things I don't think maybe people realize. When you think about being a charter captain, a lot of people look at it as, oh, that's a dream job. I get to fish every day, and they're not wrong. You guys get to fish every day, and that can be a ton of fun. But there are times you do have to deal with stuff, just like you do at any job. You got to deal with things that you weren't expecting to deal with when you got down to the boat that day, and that's just sort of part of A, running the business, and B, either being a captain or a mate on a charter boat, is you get thrown a curveball once in a while that you weren't expecting.
Yeah, that's for sure, Russell. I mean, even nowadays with all the people we have come down, we gotta keep an eye on everybody, and we actually put a line in our brochure and on our website of no hard alcohol on the boats. And my guys and I sat down and we talked about that. And bring beer, that's fine. You're out on a charter boat, you drink beer, you're on vacation, have fun, But the guys that come with the like you mentioned, the big cup of full alcohol, it just turns into trouble eventually. And we turn into a full-time babysitter, and now we got to really focus on this guy. And like I did, tie him down, so he doesn't fall in the lake. And it's nerve-wracking for us, and it puts us in a very uncomfortable position. And we're out there to catch fish and show clients a good time and come out and have a good time and drink some beers and do what you need to do. But at the end of the day, we got to get you back in safe. We got to catch some fish, and we got to have some great memories so you come back next time. And it's a big responsibility. And I got to say, I mean, over the years, I've seen a lot of people come and go, and we have a few new people in the port right now, Sheboygan, that are starting out with a charter fishing business, and more power to them. I hope they make it, but it takes time to build, and it takes a lot of responsibility, and it can be nerve wracking at times, definitely. And then you got to keep an eye on the sky and the weather besides the fishing and the people. So yeah, it's a big plate to fill.
Well, I think that's a great segue to my next question, which is, we mentioned that you don't fish a ton anymore. And this is one of the parts of the business that I think I respect you for the most, that people don't see, but I see, because you're in my store and your phone rings 15 times when you just stop in for a cup of coffee by me in the morning after the guys head out or whatever. You don't fish much anymore, not because you don't want to. We've had this conversation a lot. You'd love to be on the water every day. And I can remember already in the end of my full time with you, which we're talking late 90s, early 2000s. So we're talking 20 years ago already, Dumper, was the end of my full time with you. You were basically on the phone most of the charter. I mean, from the time that I started with you when I was 10 or 11 to the time I was 18 or 19 and ended full time with you, it went from you and me fishing to me fishing. And I think, talk about that for a minute. You're obviously running 1,300 charters a year. Just give everybody at home sort of an idea of, a quick 2 or 3 minute description or so of, what Dumper Dan does in the winter to book trips, what Dumper Dan does in the summer to book trips, and how it is to organize 12 or 1,300 trips and 4 or 5 or 6,000 people.
Well, that's exactly it, Russell. That's why I had to step off the boat, and I ran, 4 boats and ran 200 trips a year when I bought number 4, and you and I ran that, and you saw how it was, me at the wheel on the phone all the time. And what really got me is I had a really good local Sheboygan older gentleman out with me. It was 2 guys, and we were fishing, and I was on the phone the whole trip. Now, my boats all have autopilot, so they steer themselves. I got a great first mate back there like you, running a rod net and fish, setting the tackle. So here I am booking these trips, answering questions for the whole 5-6 hours back then, whatever it was, of the trip. And the guy came in and I said, you have a good time? We got our limit too. We got 10 fish, guys. I'll never forget that. And he goes, yeah, I really wanted to chat with you. I love fishing with you, but I couldn't get a word into you for 5 hours on the lake. And I thought, this is it. I got to do something different. I can't keep up with the phone and also run a boat full time. And that was my turning point to get off the lake, and that was the smartest thing I ever did, because since then we added boat 5 and 6, and I meet people every day, so they physically get to see Dumper Dan every day, morning or afternoon or evening. So that's a good thing. You see the owner, and once in a while I jump on a boat and go fishing if I decide to. But starting out nowadays, with a business, there's a lot of different avenues to take for marketing, and a lot of guys will ask me, a lot of good guys that just started and some that are no longer in the business, what did you do, Dumper, to get to where you're at? And the biggest thing is word of mouth, obviously. Word of mouth is number one. The disadvantage to word of mouth is it takes a long time to build. So that being said, since while you're waiting for you to establish a name and get going with your fishing business, there's different avenues to take in marketing, obviously, from online to print to TV to this, that, whatever you decide, to expand your horizons on advertisement. You'll have to decide on your own, but it just takes time. Word of mouth, get a good name out there, the biggest thing is a clean boat. There's a lot of times we pick up customers that have been elsewhere in different ports. And they're like, "Wow, this thing looks brand new. It's mint." I said, "All my boats are that way," and that's very important. People don't want to be on a sloppy, disorganized boat. They want to be on something that's similar to what they're used to at home, something clean, nice, and manageable. And that's what we do. So that's important. Keep a clean boat. Obviously, catch fish. Keep changing tackle, taping lures, buying stuff from you, custom stuff, and put some fish in the boat. But show them a good time. And it just takes time to build. And at that time, you're going to know if you're increasing or decreasing in trips, and then you can go from there.
Yeah, that's really important. And like I said, one of the things I've always respected about you is I'll walk down quite often either to drop something off or just to come down and see my dad or talk with you for a minute. And the way you can organize 25 to 35 guys on a average morning or afternoon trip and get them on the boats and have it all set and checking them into condos and checking them into hotels. And, I give you a ton of credit. Organization's never been my strong suit. It never has been. I do my best, but it's not my strength, and it's obviously yours. So I commend you for that. Before we finish up today, I think one of the things that, I think a lot of people wanted to know is if someone's just starting out in the charter industry or they want to just start out in the charter industry, could you give them like 2 or 3 really important tips? Nail it down to 2 or 3. If you were starting over today, of all the things you've learned in the last 35, 36 years, what would be the 2 or 3 most important tips you would give to somebody starting off today, whether it's on Lake Michigan, Lake Erie, Lake Ontario, Lake Huron? I don't care about where it is, not just Sheboygan or not just Lake Michigan, but just what would be the biggest 2 or 3 tips you'd give to somebody who wants to start a charter business?
As far as advertising goes?
No, just in general, anything. Like anything that, what do you feel is the most important? Like if somebody walked up to you and said, "Dumper Dan, what are the 2 or 3 most important things I need to do or make sure I do or make sure I don't do to help me be successful running a charter boat?"
Well, like I just touched on, I mean, the biggest thing is, purchase the boat that you want to run, make sure it's clean and to your liking. That's the most important. Organization is huge. People see that, and we're big on, from our upholstery to our buffing to everything. You just run a nice, tidy ship. I mean, I think that's number one. I really do, because the reason I say that, everybody, "Oh, what about the fish? You got to catch your limit. You got to catch all these fish." That comes later, and that doesn't always happen, But when they come down, the first thing, what do they see? They get on the boat and they look at the boat, and that's the first impression, and that speaks volume. So make sure that you and stop down by us. Check out my fleet of boats, like Russell, like you're saying. I mean, it's unbelievable how organized we run stuff, and that comes with years of experience. I get it, but run just a tidy ship, keep it clean, keep it simple, make it look nice so that people are impressed. You'll start getting compliments. It'll make you feel better. I think that's number one. I really do. The next thing is have fun out there. That's the second thing. That's notice I didn't say fishing. I said go out there and have fun with your people, because this group I just talked about from lacrosse, 36 years straight, we've caught 2 fish. We never got skunked. We caught our limit of 25, like I mentioned before, and everything in between. Guess what? They keep coming back because they enjoy fishing with us and they enjoy being on the water, and it's not a numbers game on fishing. So have fun with your people, joke around, make a little rod pool like we used to do with, picking rods that are going to have the next bite. Have a good time with your people. So clean boat, good time, and then focus on the fishing. Get your tackle lined up. Get what you want to run, your coppers, your lead cores, all the sophisticated equipment nowadays, and figure out how you're going to go after these fish and focus on that as well. So that's what I would give for advice as far as clean boat, good time, have fun, but also number 3, put some fish in the cooler.
Well, I'm glad you mentioned those 3, because I would say those 3 are probably right at the top of the line for me as well. And number 2 probably being the most overlooked thing. I don't care who you are. Nobody catches the most all the time. Nobody catches their limit all the time. And if you build your business on the brand that you always catch your limit or you always catch more than everybody else, in my opinion, you're sort of building it on a fallacy. So what's important is that you build a relationship with the customers that you have on board. Like you said, they have a good time. You're going to have customers that come once and never come again just because they were in the area or whatever the case may be, or it was a special occasion. And then you're going to have customers that are going to come for 10 or 20 or 35 years straight like you have. But whether they come once or they come 35 years in a row, showing them the optimum time on the water and enjoying that time out there regardless of the fishing is really critical. And I learned that actually, early on when I started working for you, and then I was also working for Hot Lady at the time, and you remember them back in the day, and that was a complete entertainment business. I'd be the first to admit we joked around and you teased me about it as a kid, but you were 100% right. Do you remember the nickname you called me when I worked for them?
Oh, yeah, I do.
Yeah, the soda server.
The soda?
Soda server, yeah. You called me a soda server because what Hot Lady did was they basically ran an entertainment business. So they took out corporate clients and they showed them a good time without the fishing. And we caught some fish, don't get me wrong, but the reality of it was all the things you mentioned today in this podcast about the equipment and about the experience and about the competition, they had none of that. Don't get me wrong, Pete, who ran the boat, had been on the lake a long time, but they didn't have that competition deal. They didn't, I don't want to say they didn't care, but they didn't have that drive. It didn't matter to them because what was important to them was showing the customer a good time, and they didn't care so much about the fishing. So I learned a lot. I did learn a lot from that in the sense of you don't always have to catch 20 to have a good time on the lake. We caught 2, 3, 4 a whole bunch of times and had a really good time. The customers enjoyed it. And we made that 2 or 3 or 4 fish a lot of fun. So I think that is an important thing. And I think too many people that get into charter fishing as a captain, first-time boat owners, et cetera, put too much into how many fish they're catching and not enough into, the fun levels. So I sure appreciate you joining us today on the Morning Buzz with Russell's Fishing Tech. We were blessed enough to have Dumper Dan here today, who's been running Dumper Dan Charters out of Sheboygan, Wisconsin for 36 years. He's got a fleet of 6 boats. If you don't know Dumper Dan, or if you haven't seen his stuff before, his website is www.dumperdan.com. He's got a heck of a business here in Sheboygan, Wisconsin, and it's a great opportunity whether you're somebody you're looking to go on a charter, whether you're somebody that just, you have your own weekend boat, but you want to see what charters do or how they do it. Maybe you want to jump on one of his boats to learn a little bit about fishing. Or if you're an avid fisherman, and maybe you're thinking about starting your own charter business, this particular episode here on Russell's Fishing Tech Morning Buzz is a perfect example of Dumper took some time to share with us, not only about his business, but about all the things that go into running a charter fishing operation and the do's and don'ts on it. So we sure thank you for your time today, Dumper. Hope you enjoyed sort of rolling the clock back a little bit today.
Yeah, it was fun. Thanks a lot, Russell. And once again, thanks for having me on board. It was great.
All right. Well, check us out every week, Sunday morning, 7 a.m. Central Time on the Morning Buzz with Russell's Fishing Tech.